Somewhere in eastern Guangdong, there is a town of 133,000 people that produces 200 million bras every year, 2,000 factories, 550 registered brands, and the entire industry started because one man thought his wife deserved a better fit. The town is called Chendian. You have almost certainly worn something it made.
I spent weeks verifying this, and the numbers hold up. Chendian and its neighbor Gouhu cover roughly 50 square miles and account for the majority of the world's brassiere production by volume. This is not regional marketing. Every factory district in China calls itself the capital of something sock capital, button capital. But independent export data confirms Chendian's claim. It is the real thing.
Think of it like a coral reef. One organism starts building, neighbors copy the structure, and within a few years you have this massive interconnected system that feeds an entire ocean. Except the organism was a rice miller named Kai Xingkai. The structure was a cotton bra pattern, and the ocean is the global underwear market.
What really got me is that this is not ancient history. We are talking about 1980. People alive today remember when every family on the street was still farming rice. And then 4 years later, 80% of them were stitching underwear. That speed of transformation, I think most of us would find it terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But here is the part nobody photographs. Inside Chendian, there is a community called Gouhu Ditch Lake sitting on the floodplain, watching the factory lights glow along Highway 324. Same town, different story. Stick with me because Gouhu is where the miracle gets complicated. Michael, take us back 1,000 years. Quick intros before we jump in.
Michael here. This is the kind of topic I could talk about for hours.
Hi, I'm River. I like connecting dots across different worlds. This is perfect for that.
Bella here. This one surprised me. I think it will surprise you too. Good to have everyone. Here we go.
Picture a cultural island. Chendian sits on the Chaoshan coast in eastern Guangdong, technically the same province as Guangzhou and Shenzhen, but those cities feel like a different country. This is Teochew territory, not Cantonese. Different dialect, different cuisine, different social architecture. Imagine finding a pocket of medieval French speakers in the middle of modern Paris, same nation, different century.
The linguistic evidence is remarkable. The Teochew dialect preserves phonetic features from Tang Dynasty Chinese the 7th to 9th centuries. Sound patterns that standard Mandarin erased over 1,000 years ago are still spoken daily in the markets of Chendian. Linguists study Teochew the way archaeologists study fossils, as a living record of something the rest of the world lost.
And this is not just an academic curiosity. When you walk through Chendian and hear grandmothers speaking Teochew to children who answer in Mandarin, you are witnessing a dialect that has survived every dynasty, every revolution, and every economic upheaval for over a millennium. That resilience tells you something about the people who carry it.
The physical evidence matches. Maud Hall was built between 1341 and 1368 Yuan dynasty. It still stands. 650 years of continuous settlement means the clan networks that eventually funded the bra boom were already centuries old before Kai Xingkai ever touched a sewing machine.
1,000-year-old dialect, Yuan dynasty clan halls. And then in 1980, one rice miller changes everything. River, walk us through what Kai Xingkai actually did and how something that simple rewired an entire economy.
Here is the case study. 1980. A rice miller named Kai Xingkai designs a more comfortable cotton bra for his wife. China's reform and opening up policy had just begun for the first time. Individuals could sell goods privately. Kai's design was simple enough that any household with a sewing machine could replicate it. The clan networks did the rest. Patterns, techniques, and customers moved through extended families like water through irrigation channels.
I want people to really feel what that timeline means. By 1984, 80% of Chendian households had abandoned farming. 4 out of 5 families in a 650-year-old agricultural community changed their entire livelihood in 4 years. That is less time than it takes to finish a college degree. The courage that required and the pressure is hard to overstate.
Think of an avalanche. One rock shifts and the whole mountainside follows, not because every rock decided independently, but because the structure connecting them made the cascade inevitable. The clan networks were that structure. They had been moving information for centuries. CISM gave them a product worth moving.
But here is what complicates the success story. 2,000 factories sounds massive until you learn most are family operations, 3 to 10 workers in a converted living room, 12-hour shifts, piece rate pay. Roughly 30% of the workers are male, which surprises everyone. The people making 200 million bras are not the ones getting rich, the factory owners and export brokers are.
550 brands, thin margins, and a highway corridor where the money pooled while the edges stayed quiet. Later in this video, we will see how e-commerce is starting to reshape who wins inside Chendian. But first, Bella, tell us about the community the cameras never visit.
This is the part of the story that stays with you. Gouhu is one of 10 communities inside Chendian. The name means ditch lake. It sits near the Lion River floodplain, away from Highway 324, where factories and showrooms cluster. Same postal code as the underwear capital of the world. Completely different reality.
The data makes it undeniable. Chaoshan district, the district Chendian, belongs to had a per capita GDP of only 32% of the Guangdong provincial average as recently as 2011. A district globally famous for manufacturing, inside one of China's wealthiest provinces, earning less than a third of the provincial average. The headline is a success story. The data is more complicated.
Think of a spotlight on a stage. Highway 324 is the lit strip, brilliant, visible, photographed by every journalist who visits. Gouhu is the unlit wing. The audience sees the performance. They never see the stage hands. And here is what makes it structural, not accidental. The merchant families who controlled rice trade for centuries are the same families who control the factory trade. The product changed. The power map did not.
Chendian has 133,000 residents and an estimated 70,000 overseas connections. Diaspora in Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia. For roughly every 2 people in town, there is 1 person abroad tied to it by blood or clan. Those networks sent money home for generations, but to specific families, specific clans, specific streets, not evenly. If you were not connected, you were Gouhu.
Gouhu is the margin of the miracle, the place that proves transformation and equity are not the same thing. But the Diaspora that funded those factories also preserved something no supply chain can move. River, take us into the culture that outlasted every reinvention.
The Diaspora is one of the largest in Southeast Asia communities in Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and Malaysia that have been sending money back to the Chaoshan coast for over a century. For Chendian, those connections were not sentimental. They were financial infrastructure. Before anyone had heard of export licenses, Chendian already had family members in the countries where the finished product could be sold. The supply chain existed as a social network before it became an economic one.
Remember the coral reef from Scene 1. The diaspora is the ocean current that feeds it. Remittances funded clan halls, a hospital, and eventually the first sewing machines. The seed capital for the bra miracle came from relatives in Bangkok, not from banks, not from government programs. Picture a family WhatsApp group, except it is 100 years old and denominated in gold.
And here is what makes me hopeful about Chendian, even when the economic story is uneven. The bra factories could theoretically move to Vietnam or Bangladesh if labor costs shift, supply chains go where the margins are. But the Teochew dialect spoken at every factory break, the gongfu tea served between shifts, the Yingzh warrior dance performed at festivals for 400 years, those cannot relocate. They are rooted to this coast.
One more number that tells the whole story. Despite 1,600 millimeters of annual rainfall, the area had only 450 cubic meters of freshwater per person, classified as absolute water scarcity. The Lion River that sustained 6 centuries of rice farming now carries factory runoff. The same water system that built this place is being destroyed by the industry that replaced its purpose. Drop in the comments when you look at a product label that says Made in China. Do you ever wonder what the factory cost the town it sits in?
A dialect older than a millennium. A warrior dance from the Ming Dynasty. A river paying the price for 200 million bras. Michael, bring us home. What does a village called Ditch Lake actually teach the rest of us?
The image that stays with me is the spotlight and the wing. Highway 324 lit up with factory showrooms and neon. Gouhu on the floodplain, close enough to hear the sewing machines, too far from the highway to share in the revenue. Every consumer product has a version of this. You wear it, you use it, you never see the town it came from. Chendian just makes the geography honest enough to photograph.
Every data point I brought to this story tells the same structural truth. 2,000 factories, 200 million pieces a year. The production is real. But the idea that this was a rising tide lifting all boats is contradicted by the 32% GDP figure. The miracle had winners and it had witnesses. Gouhu watched from the floodplain.
What gives me hope is the layering. 650 years of settlement beneath the factory floor. A dialect that outlived every dynasty. Clan networks that predate every supply chain. The factories may shift, someday costs change. Automation arrives. E-commerce is already reshaping who wins inside Chendian right now. But the culture underneath is not going anywhere. That is the part worth protecting.
And the story is not finished. Small operations, 3 workers in a converted living room, are now selling directly through live streaming platforms. The internet erased the middleman that Highway 324 used to provide. Whether that levels the playing field for communities like Gouhu or just creates a new hierarchy is still an open question.
If you forget everything else from today, remember this. The world needed bras. Chendian answered. One rice miller turned 80% of a farming town into factory workers in 4 years. But Gouhu, the ditch by the lake, reminds us that even the biggest transformations have margins. And the people living on those margins have a story the spotlight never tells. All right, quiz time. Let's find out what stuck. Think through each question carefully before you answer.
If you learned something new today, the best way to say thanks is a like and a subscribe. It genuinely helps.
Chendian transformed from rice farming to bra manufacturing in roughly 4 years. What pre-existing infrastructure allowed the knowledge to spread so rapidly? The correct answer is B. Centuries-old clan networks that had been sharing resources and information across extended families acted as the distribution system for Kai Xinkai's bra design.
Chaoshan district is globally famous for manufacturing, yet its per capita GDP was only 32% of the Guangdong provincial average. What does this reveal about the nature of Chendian's boom? The correct answer is D. Wealth concentrated along Highway 324 and within specific clan networks, leaving communities like Gouhu at the margin despite being inside the manufacturing zone.
River and Bella both argue that Chendian's culture is simultaneously its deepest asset and its most fragile feature. What distinction are they drawing? The correct answer is A. The Teochew dialect, Gongfu tea, and Yingzh warrior dance are anchored to this specific coast and cannot relocate. But the bra factories could move to cheaper regions if costs shift.
We started with a rice miller and ended with a river carrying the cost. What surprised me most was how the speed and the structure never reconciled 4 years of economic revolution, sitting on top of 650 years of social hierarchy that barely shifted.
The coral reef analogy kept proving itself. The clan networks built this industry the same way they built everything else for centuries, by sharing within trusted circles. That is why the boom was so fast and so uneven at the same time. Speed and exclusion came from the same source.
The number that reshaped my thinking was the 70,000. 70,000 diaspora connections from a town of 133,000. That ratio rewrites how you understand where capital originates. The seed money did not come from institutions, it came from cousins in Bangkok. That model does not appear in most economics textbooks, and maybe it should.
What changed my perspective was the culture surviving underneath. We tend to assume industrial revolution erases everything that came before. But in Chendian, a 1,000-year-old dialect is still spoken at the tea table between shifts. The factories sit on top of the culture. They did not replace it. That resilience is the real story.
If you want to keep exploring cities the world underestimates, subscribe and watch the next video in the Cities series. Leave a comment below what product do you use every day without knowing where it was made. This is Professor Erica, signing off.